Welcome to Podcasting for Latina CEOs, the go-to podcast for passionpreneurs Latinas ready to launch and grow their online businesses and own their voice with podcasting. I'm Heidi de la Cruz, writer, two-time award-winning podcaster, and podcast launch coach on a mission to help you build a life of freedom, wealth, and impact by turning your ideas into income. If you're a Latina ready to break generational cycles and create your own table, this show is for you. Let's build our dreams juntas. Con amor, Coach Heidi. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Podcasting for Latina CEOs. I am your host and your coach, Heidi de la Cruz. And today I am going to talk to you about how I landed a 4-figure speaking engagement from home. So it was a virtual one. And that was really super cool. But before I get into that, I do want to share a testimonial from one of my most recent clients, Mabel. I helped her relaunch her podcast after taking a break for almost a year. She reached out because she wasn't sure how to do that or the process. And I am so happy and glad that she was able to trust me and I was able to guide her through that. So this is what she said. She said, I wanted to relaunch my podcast after taking a break for almost a year. I turned to Heidi for guidance and wisdom. During our coaching call, she brainstormed ideas with me, advised me on how to proceed, and cheered me on. I'm thankful for her support, especially for her gentle encouragement to get back into the game. This is Mabel from Far From Home podcast. You can listen to her podcast wherever you listen to podcasts or even where you're listening to this one. Just search up Far From Home. And I was actually a recent guest on her podcast. So you can definitely check out that episode. I'll link it in the show notes. And yeah, it was really fun helping her navigate the relaunch process. I'm so glad that she was able to get back into the podcasting game because, again, this is so much fun and I encourage anyone who wants to start a podcast to just do it. And if you have any questions or anything that you want me to answer on the podcast, please remember that there is the send a text feature in the show notes that Buzzsprout has. So you can utilize that to send me a text directly, send me a message. And lastly, before I get into the episode I do have 2 spots for editing services available. So if you would like to outsource your editing or want to take that off your plate and get some time back, let's talk. Send me a text or send me an email and we can discuss pricing and the packages and all that fun stuff. So remember, just 2 spots available for podcast editing services. All right, so let's get into how I landed a 4-figure speaking engagement from home. Speaking from home. Before we get into that speaking engagement, let me just take you back to when I actually started speaking after I had launched my podcast. So I never considered myself like a speaker or like a public speaker or like a speaker at all until not even when I started my podcast. I never really pictured or put 2 and 2 together that with my podcast, I was like, oh, I am also a speaker. I just never put that together until after I started my podcast and I got invited to start speaking, which is crazy. So the very first speaking engagement that I got invited to speak was actually for a Latina networking group here locally in Central Florida. And this was in August of 2022. So this was right after I had launched my poetry book and a few months after I had launched my first podcast. And I had gone to they had monthly meetings, this Latina networking group. And so I had gone to their July meeting and met, the 3 ladies that were running it, met the other Latinas business owners that were there. And they reached out to me to be their guest speaker for the August meeting. And I was so excited because I was like, oh my gosh, I had never been invited to speak before, especially in person too. And then I had asked, I was like, what do you guys want me to talk about? I have no idea what to even talk about. And they were like, your book and your podcast, both of the things. Why did you decide to write this book? Why did you decide to start your podcast? That's what we want you to share about. So That's exactly what I did. And then after that, I got invited to speak again in person. It was actually I had met two sisters at that networking event, and so they loved what the podcast was about, the concept of it, and so they were actually guests on the podcast. And so when they were celebrating their 2 years of their clothing boutique, they invited me to be the keynote speaker for their celebration for their boutique. And that was actually a year later, so August of 2023. And never had been a keynote speaker before in my life. I shared a little bit about my story. And honestly, like I really could have done a better job preparing for that speaking engagement because I feel like I did not the best that I could. So yeah. And then after that, I got invited to speak another 2 year celebration for another like it's like an active clothing wear for women. So it was their event was more for like wellness because it was activewear. So they had like invited other people who were in the wellness space. And so I got invited to speak because actually at that time I was creating journals. Oh my goodness. Yes, I was creating journals and I was selling them online on Amazon. And I think they're still available. I think if you like put my name on Amazon, you can see my journals. But there was like a prayer journal, a gratitude journal, and there was a into my thoughts journal is what it was called. It was for creative. So like if you had like a big project, that journal was supposed to help you like map out that project. So she really liked the idea of like the journaling, and that's how like good for the mindset and so like the mental wellness of things. So that's why she wanted me to talk at that event about why I started my journals and what type of journals I had and things like that. And so I was able to take my journals and my poetry book and have people purchase it on site, which was really, really cool. All right. My first virtual speaking engagement was actually in 2024 in October, where I taught at the Latinas in Podcasting Virtual Summit. I taught about podcast SEO. So that was the first time that I was speaking virtually at a summit about podcasting, which was again really, really cool because I was like, I actually like teaching about this stuff. I love teaching about how to podcast, what it takes to start a podcast. But as I continued podcasting, obviously I learned about podcast SEO, where to optimize and all that. So then I started teaching other people how to do it. So that was the first virtual speaking summit that I was able to land. Then after that, I just got invited into more virtual summits and speaking engagements. So then I also spoke at the Moms Behind the Mic virtual summit. My sister actually invited me to speak also virtually for her college. They had it was like a career panel. So I talked about like my career in corporate and then also my podcast and my business. So that was really cool to speak to college students about like all the possibilities that are out there after college. Then I got to speak at another virtual summit called Create, Bless, Repeat. And that one was geared more towards mom entrepreneurs in the faith-based, like people who are really centered, right, their business within their faith. So that was really cool to talk about my podcast and how like my immigration podcast ties into my faith and what I believe. And then I was invited to speak on another virtual summit, which is called Make Your Business Social Media Optional, which was literally just talking about how to use podcasting as your business funnel, which is exactly what I do with this podcast. I then got invited to speak at Lead Like a Mother virtual summit, which was talking all thing motherhood, all thing entrepreneur, how to, how they say, how to balance it all, like, and things like that. And that one, again, they've all been so fun because they've all been like a different part of me and in this journey. Like, I am a mom, I am a wife, I have my 9 to 5, I have this podcast, I have my immigration podcast, I have my business. And so it's just been fun to like talk at different summits about different parts of my business. Yeah. And then I got invited also to speak in person in Texas at Hustle and Socialize. I led a breakout session talking about how to start a podcast. I think I mentioned this in another episode before. And then from there, like 5 people actually launched their podcasts from just going through the breakout session and just me teaching them like, okay, this is everything you need to start a podcast. And here you go. Here's all the tools you need. And 5 women were able to launch their podcast from that breakout session, which was amazing. And then, okay, so here we go. Then you guys know that Hispanic Heritage Month runs from September 15th through October 15th, and it aligns with a lot of the Central America's countries that have Independence Day throughout the 15th, 16th, and I think 17th of September. And I remember, so I have set up where people can book me to speak at events, right? I have a Google form that you can fill out to let me know a little bit about your event and what you want me to speak about, because I speak about different topics, as you can clearly hear. And then I also have at the bottom of the form, like the price range or the budget, right, of that you may have for your event. And so I remember seeing the form come in. I got an email saying the form came in, and then they had booked a meeting with me to talk about their event. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And obviously, like, their budget wise was in the four-figure range. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I wonder where they're going to fly me to. I wonder like where this is, like what this is all about. And so, yeah, so I got the email that the form came in, and then they had booked a meeting so we could talk the details about the event. And so the time came for the meeting, for the meeting time. And I remember like we did the meeting, and she told me what company she was in and what exactly the event was for and what they were looking for. And so I was like, okay, great. So how did you even find me? And she was like, literally, I was just Googling. Like we wanted someone to talk to the employees for Hispanic Heritage Month, and they wanted someone to talk about immigration. And I was like, no way. So obviously she was Googling, and my podcast came up, and the first podcast, right? The American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants. So my immigration podcast came up, and she was like, you were just the perfect fit for what we were looking for. And so I was like, oh my God, okay, SEO, okay, podcast SEO, okay, just like, it just, how just you set up all these systems and they actually work, you guys. Like SEO is king. Like I will never get tired of saying that. But yeah, so it was really interesting. So I was like waiting for her to tell me like, where this event was going to be and things like that. And she was like, no, it's going to be virtual. And I was like, oh my God, y'all are going to pay me 4 figures to speak from home. So I don't have to leave my house, talk about my podcast, and talk about why I started it. Like, what? I was like mind blown, but I was like, hey, I'll take it. Like, this was so cool. But I will say, like, it was a lot of fun. Like, the people were so engaged, and the presenter, like, really did her homework. Like, she listened to episodes and she asked me about the episodes, and we, like, gave examples and things like that. And, like, people had really good questions, and oh my gosh, it was just so fun. And then, like, it was an hour long. So I was a keynote speaker for a virtual event, which was literally an hour. And I had, slides, and then I did my presentation and my talk, and then they had a little Q&A, and like, that was it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this was like the best 4-figure money that I have made. And so it was just so cool. And I was just like, this is so amazing how my podcasts have brought me all these speaking opportunities that I never thought that I would do. Like when I first started my podcast, like, it was not a goal of mine to be invited to speak. It was not a goal of mine to like be a public speaker and like teach about podcasting. Things just happen organically. And I share my experience because I want other Latinas to know what is possible for them, just for being themselves, just for sharing their stories, just for having the audacity and the courage and the bravery to share and use your voice and create your own platform. If it wasn't for me creating the first podcast and creating my own table and creating my platform, like I would not have landed all these speaking engagements and be invited to speak and teach and just meet people out there who are also trying to podcast. So if you are looking for a sign to start your podcast, I really, really hope that you find encouragement in my experiences, because honestly, like, not that I wasn't looking for them, but it's just like they've all just come at the right time. Like things just like lined up, things just aligned. And yeah, so obviously, I've had more speaking engagements after that. I went to Miami after that to speak at the Latina Expo, also to share about podcasting. I was on a panel there. And then earlier this year, I got picked to speak about immigration. So I was on a panel with the AND campaign to speak on immigration. I was also on a podcast panel, facilitated a podcast panel at the Besties Boardroom Conference earlier this year. Also a panelist at the Vision of Voices Conference earlier this year, also in person. And then most recently, I did the Moms Behind the Mic Summit again. I got invited to come back. And that one, I was a panel to speak about how to monetize your podcast, which I actually have a whole episode about. So yeah. So I'm always just sharing these experiences. I'm always sharing my journey in order to inspire, in order to motivate, and just show other Latinas what is possible when you create your own table. Like, you will get invited to speak if you wish so, right? You can use your podcast as a business funnel to get clients. You just have to make sure that you set up your systems the right way. So once again, I mentioned earlier today, I have 2 spots for editing clients. If you already have your podcast and you want to get that time back and take the editing off your plate. And then also, I am here to help you, to those who are ready to launch their podcast. I have the Voice Method podcast course, which is only $197, is for 6 weeks. You do it at your own pace, and you send me emails with any questions or clarity that you may have throughout the time that you're doing the course. Like, you're not going to be doing this alone. I promise you, I am going to be there for you every step of the way. There's also the 1-hour strategy call that you can do with me. It's only $70. We will meet for 1 hour, and you will bring all your podcasting questions, and I will make sure that we go over everything that you need to start a podcast. And at the end, I will send you an email, a detailed email with a summary of our call, what we talked about, the questions that I answered, and then also your next steps. And I will check in on you. I promise you, I will not leave you alone to do this, right? I will be there for you every step of the way. And then the other option is one-on-one 6-week coaching with me. So we will meet once a week for 1 hour on Zoom, and we will work on the voice method step by step, and I will guide you through the whole process of launching your podcast. That's the other option. So the link for the Stand Store is in the show notes, and that is where you can find all the options. And I am ready to help so many Latinas start their podcast this year. I need to keep better track of how many people I am helping, because I believe this year I'm already up to 5 Latinas that I've helped to start their podcast. So I really need to do a better job at keeping track. But if you have any questions, again, utilize the text option in the show notes. Send me a text, or if you want to send me an email, you can do that at Heidi@HeidiDeLaCruz.com. And yeah, podcasting, literally, there's no limit to the possibilities that can come and the opportunities that can come with podcasting. And again, podcasting is you building your own platform, you building your own table. You're not waiting to be invited to spaces. Like, you are creating your own space. And it's not like social media where it's borrowed real estate. You own this space. You own your podcast. So Yes, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to help you start your podcast and land 4-figure speaking engagements like I did. And yes, until next time, con mucho amor, Coach Heidi.
Thank you for listening to Mommy Podcast.